Picture this: a grand old mansion, a will that holds the key to a family's future, and a secret that's about to unravel everything. This is the story of Margaret, a woman who thought she knew her family, but was about to discover a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. Margaret's grandmother, Eleanor, was the matriarch of the family. She was kind, sharp as a tack, and had built a small fortune from scratch. Her sprawling estate, Willow Creek, wasn't just a house. It was the heart of their family, filled with memories of summer picnics and holiday gatherings. When Eleanor passed away, the family was heartbroken, but there was also a quiet tension in the air. Everyone knew the reading of the will would be a momentous occasion. Margaret had always been close to her grandmother. They shared a love for gardening and classic literature. Eleanor often told Margaret, "This place, this legacy, it needs a heart to keep it beating. It needs you, my dear." Margaret cherished those words, holding them close. The day of the will reading arrived. The family gathered in the formal living room of Willow Creek, the air thick with anticipation. The family lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, a man who had served the family for decades, cleared his throat and began to read. Most of the smaller bequests were as expected, sentimental items and modest sums for various relatives. But then came the main event, the estate, and that's when the bomb dropped. Mr. Abernathy announced that the entirety of Willow Creek, along with the bulk of the remaining fortune, was left to Margaret's cousin Clara. A collective gasp filled the room. Margaret felt the floor drop out from under her. Clara? Clara, who had barely visited their grandmother in her final years? Clara, who always seemed more interested in the family's wealth than its well-being? Clara put on a show of surprise, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Oh, Grandma Eleanor," she whispered. "I'm so honored. I will cherish her memory and this home forever." But Margaret saw a flicker of triumph in her eyes, a look that sent a shiver down her spine. It just didn't make sense. Her grandmother had practically promised her the estate. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Margaret tried to talk to her parents, her aunts, and uncles, but they just offered sympathetic platitudes. "Wills can be surprising, dear," they said. "Eleanor must have had her reasons." But Margaret couldn't let it go. Her intuition screamed that there was more to this story. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying her last conversations with her grandmother. Eleanor had been frail, yes, but her mind was still sharp. She wouldn't have just changed her mind so drastically without a word. Driven by a mix of grief and suspicion, Margaret decided she had to investigate. She started with the most obvious place, the will itself. She requested a copy from Mr. Abernathy. When she examined it, the signature looked off. It was shaky, more so than her grandmother's usual handwriting, even in her later days. It was close, but not quite right. Was she just imagining things? Her next stop was her grandmother's study. It had been left untouched, a sanctuary of books and memories. As she sifted through old letters and documents, she found what she was looking for: a box of her grandmother's personal correspondence from the past year. She spent hours comparing the signature on the will to dozens of other recent signatures on letters, checks, and birthday cards. The more she looked, the more convinced she became. The signature on the will was a forgery. A very good one, but a forgery nonetheless. Now she had a suspicion, but she needed proof. Who would have the skill and the audacity to do such a thing? Her mind immediately went to Clara. Clara had always been clever, but also manipulative. Margaret recalled a conversation from a family gathering a year ago. Clara had been complaining about her debts and half-jokingly said, "If only I could learn how to perfectly copy someone's signature, all my problems would be solved." At the time, everyone had laughed it off. Now it sounded like a confession. Margaret knew she was walking on thin ice. Accusing a family member of something so serious without concrete evidence could tear the family apart and make her look like a sore loser. She needed an accomplice, someone she could trust implicitly. She thought of her Uncle Ben, Eleanor's younger brother. He was a quiet, observant man who had always been fair and level-headed. He had also seemed just as surprised as Margaret at the reading of the will. She went to see Uncle Ben, laying out her suspicions and showing him the signature comparisons. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed in concentration. He examined the documents closely, holding them up to the light. After a long silence, he looked at her and said, "You might be onto something, Maggie. Your grandmother's signature had a particular flourish on the E. It's missing here. It's subtle, but it's not right." With Uncle Ben on her side, Margaret felt emboldened. He suggested they talk to Sarah, Eleanor's live-in caregiver for the last 2 years. Sarah was a kind woman who had been devoted to Eleanor. Perhaps she had seen something. When they approached Sarah, she was initially hesitant to speak, clearly intimidated. But Uncle Ben's calm demeanor reassured her. With a bit of gentle prodding, Sarah's story came tumbling out. She confessed that in the weeks before Eleanor's death, Clara had become a frequent visitor, but she didn't come to comfort her ailing aunt. Instead, she would bring documents for Eleanor to sign, claiming they were for managing her affairs. Sarah remembered one day in particular. Eleanor had been very weak and confused. Clara had guided her hand to sign a document, which Sarah now realized was unusually thick and formal-looking. At the time, Sarah had thought it was odd, but she hadn't wanted to overstep her bounds. She also mentioned that Clara had given her a generous gift of several $1,000s shortly after Eleanor passed, telling her it was a bonus for her excellent care and to keep quiet about her visits. This was the smoking gun. Clara had not only forged a will, but had also bribed a witness into silence. The pieces were all falling into place. Margaret and Uncle Ben knew they had to act, but they had to be smart about it. A public accusation would be messy. They decided on a different approach, a family intervention. They called another family meeting at Willow Creek, under the pretense of discussing the future of the estate. Clara arrived, radiating a false sense of magnanimity, talking about her plans to preserve her grandmother's legacy. The entire family was present. Once everyone was settled, Margaret stood up. Her heart was pounding, but she looked directly at Clara. "Before we discuss the future," she began, her voice steady, "I think we need to discuss the past, specifically, the validity of grandmother's will." A hush fell over the room. Clara's smile faltered. "What are you talking about, Margaret? The will is perfectly legal." "Is it?" Margaret replied, pulling out the copies of the signatures. "Because I, and a handwriting expert I consulted, have some serious doubts about this signature." She then turned to Sarah, who was sitting nervously in the corner. "Sarah, would you mind telling everyone about Clara's visits in Grandma's final weeks? And about the documents she had her sign?" All eyes turned to Sarah. Terrified but resolved, Sarah recounted the story of the coerced signature and the subsequent bribe. The color drained from Clara's face. She started to stammer. "She's lying. She's a disgruntled employee. Margaret is just jealous." But then, Uncle Ben spoke. "I've seen the evidence, Clara, and I've spoken with Mr. Abernathy. It turns out, you approached him with a new will just 2 days before Eleanor passed. He thought it was strange, but you had a notarized signature, a signature we now know was obtained under false pretenses from a woman who wasn't of sound mind." The weight of the evidence, presented calmly and rationally, was overwhelming. The family looked from Margaret's determined face to Clara's crumbling facade. The truth was undeniable. Clara had tried to steal their family's legacy. Faced with the united front of her family and the threat of legal action for fraud and elder abuse, Clara broke down. In the end, Clara confessed to everything. The fraudulent will was nullified, and Eleanor's previous true will was reinstated. As Eleanor had always intended, the Willow Creek estate was left to Margaret, with provisions made for the rest of the family. The betrayal left a deep scar, and the relationship with Clara was shattered beyond repair. But through the pain, the family also found a renewed sense of unity. They had stood together for the truth. Margaret, now the custodian of Willow Creek, vowed to honor her grandmother's true legacy, one built not just on wealth, but on integrity, love, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Thank you so much for watching. It's a powerful reminder that truth and integrity are worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'll see you in the next one.